Hello and welcome to another edition of Long Beach Treasures. I'm your host, Harvey Keller. Today we're going to be taking a tour of St. Anthony's Catholic Church. This is the Mother Church of Catholicism in Long Beach. And joining me today is Father Richard Kretkelberg, who is, I believe, the pastor here at St. Anthony's. Thank you, Father Richard, for joining me.
Well, Harvey, thank you for coming to St. Anthony. We're just overjoyed that you would like to do some coverage of our wonderful church celebrating its centennial this year. And we'd like to share a little bit of our story with you.
Oh, we'd love to hear it. This is a beautiful church. Now, this is the third church on this site?
That's right. The first church built in 1902 is actually currently standing and was moved from this site over to 19th and Cerritos, and eventually became the parish of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. But that church used to sit right here on this corner, and when the congregation eventually outgrew the small little church, they decided to build the brick church that was constructed in 1913. And that church lasted just 21 years until the fatal 1933 earthquake. And all came tumbling down. And of course, then remarkably, within 1 year, they constructed the third church on the foundation, which we see before us here. This is the third church constructed on the foundation of the brick church, which the foundations are all still right below, and the basement of this church. Now, people who remember the new third church would not remember these spires and the mosaics, because they were added under the pastor, Monsignor Dolan, Bernie Dolan, in the 1950s. Late 40s, early 50s, they completed the spires and then added the mosaics to the front of the church.
Now, what do the saints represent here along the facade of the church?
Well, wonderfully, the mosaics of the saints actually record the history of the Catholic presence here in Long Beach from the establishment of this first church in 1902, because afterwards you have the foundation of the parishes, and that's why they refer to St. Anthony as sort of the mother church here in Long Beach, because all of these parishes sprung from this church. And so you would notice that you have St. Matthew's over here, which was the next church built in 1920, was the first Catholic church added to Long Beach afterwards. And then after that, you had were added the other 1920s parishes, which would have been Holy Innocents and Our Lady of Mount Carmel in 23. And after that, Athanasius, Bartholomew, and Barnabas are our 30s parishes that were built then. And then in the 40s came the parishes of St. Lucy, St. Cyprian, and Our Lady of Refuge. Then after that, we have, in the 50s was built St. Cornelius. Now, St. Cornelius just barely made it on the corner there, was built in the early 50s, but poor St. Joseph and St. Maria Goretti didn't make it because the mosaics were completed before those parishes actually inaugurated.
And the significance of the Blessed Mother?
Yes, the large mosaic, because at that time in the early 50s, the church had just proclaimed the solemnity and feast and the tradition of faith in the Catholic Church of the Assumption of the Blessed Mary into heaven. And so they decided to feature a mosaic of the Assumption of the Blessed Mother into heaven, surrounded then very anachronistically by members and figures of the church history sort of mixed up all together, because of course you have the 12 apostles, but then also you have, for instance, Archbishop Cantwell over here, and you have Cardinal McIntyre. You have a very young Bishop Manning, who later became Cardinal Archbishop, Timothy Manning of Los Angeles. all who figured into the history of St. Anthony over the years. But then especially, which a lot of our viewers would remember, were the founding religious communities that played a role in the history and the establishment of our schools. And so you have the foundress and members of the Immaculate Heart community that were involved in St. Anthony's Girls' School, and also the founder and members of the Brothers of the Holy Cross, who were part and parcel.
Now, Monsignor Golderon told me that's his picture sticking out right there in the corner with just the small face. Is that true?
That's right, which just goes to say that this mosaic has life and is continuing. They added Monsignor Golderon's figure there in the corner as he became a very significant presence and pastor of St. Anthony for many years.
The mosaic and the tiles from Italy?
Yes, they were fashioned in Italy and then brought over here in the early 50s, and local artists and craftspeople actually applied the mosaic and placed it both outside here externally, and then our wonderful mosaics inside the church, which tell the life and story of St. Anthony.
Could we go in and look at the mosaics inside?
By all means, please come in.
Okay. Now, Father, I'm sure you have quite a large Latino population in your parish. Do you have masses both in English and Spanish?
Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, the congregation and membership here at St. Anthony's now is close to 70% Hispanic. And so we have 3 masses in Spanish, beginning 2 in the morning on Sunday and 1 in the evening, and they're packed. We have people out to the sidewalk.
Are your parishioners, are you maintaining your level as it used to be, or are the numbers declining?
Harvey, that is a wonderful question, because the facts are the actual Catholic population is burgeoning, and so we almost don't have enough room for the Catholic population that is actually moving into the area. From the Latino community, also the Asian community. Our next largest membership in the parish is actually Filipino. And then the rest of the makeup of our parish mass attendants would be Anglo and African American.
This is a beautiful interior. The marble walls, are they from Italy also?
Yes, all of this was part of the design put together during the years of Monsignor Bernard Dolan. And so the mosaics are actually thematically put together based on the life and story of St. Anthony of Padua, and also, of course, known primarily in Portugal as St. Anthony of Lisbon, where he was born. But each of the mosaics tell part of his story, becoming a preacher in the history of the Catholic Church, and then the other mosaics along the sides basically make up the Stations of the Cross.
The detailing and workmanship on the beams are just outstanding. Are those all hand carved?
Actually, no, they are applied plaster, made in molds and then applied to the beams. I've learned these things especially recently because of the challenge to keep them up and to keep them restored. So we've discovered some of this. Some of it is hand carving and some of it is plaster mold.
Some churches have mass confessions and some use the confessional still. What does St. Anthony's have?
Well, we have actually left 2 traditional confessionals here, which will eventually become special shrine areas under our planning for the future. But in the back here, we have 2 confessionals that are, according to the Vatican Council, 2 requirements which allow a penitent to come into the confessional and to either be face to face with the priest or to kneel in privacy. So each penitent coming in has the option to be in the presence of the priest or behind a screen. And I'd be happy to show that to you if you'd like to see it.
Sure, I'd love to see it.
So Harvey, this is the new look of things. If you were coming into confession, then I would be seated here, and you would simply make the choice of going to that side and kneeling down on the other side of the screen. And I'm over here, so I really can't see who's coming in. Or you may sit down here in sort of a counseling conference position, and I'd be able to discuss with you in. And what we find is that people understand the whole, the sacrament much better, that it is really coming to encounter the Lord in a special way and to be able to examine one's life and how it's going at this point, and to put cares and concerns in the hands of the Lord in a personable way. And we find that generally speaking, our parishioners really love the new opportunity, especially our handy-capable people are able to come right in with their wheelchairs into this space and be present on either side and take advantage of the sacrament of reconciliation. And so we're very happy about that feature also.
Well, Father Richard, this is not like any confessional I've ever been in before. It's unique.
It is. We want it to be welcoming and to represent really the Church's understanding of the compassion and welcome that the Church wants to communicate in the confessional and sacrament of reconciliation setting.
How many does the Church hold?
Comfortably, a little over 500. Uncomfortably, about 550.
And do you have daily masses here?
We do. We have 2 daily masses still. We have a 7:15 mass in the morning, and then Monsignor Gualderon continues to celebrate his noon mass every day, except Sunday.
How many priests are here at St. Anthony's?
Presently, we are 2 full-time. Father Jose Magana, newly ordained priest just of 5 years, is with me here as my principal associate and parochial vicar. And then Monsignor Gualderon is here as pastor emeritus and in retirement. But anybody who knows Monsignor Gualderon knows that he has a very active retirement.
I think you wanted to go over to the rectory and show us some of the past history of the church.
Yes, and I'd like to show you our new archives.
All right, let's go. Okay, now where are we?
Okay, we're in St. Anthony's Rectory, the home of the priests, and this is also probably part of the new look of the church in the present time, in that most people would know that rectories, many of them hold the parish offices, and this rectory did hold the parish offices for a long time, but now we have a parish center where all our offices and for not only the priests but the lay leadership of the parish and so forth basically have their operations for office and everything. So we had the opportunity here at the rectory for our centennial to allow this space to become a new archives for St. Anthony Parish, and we're very excited about that.
In 1903, when the church was built, this would have been really out in the sticks, wouldn't it?
Yeah, very much so, and we have some pictures that pretty much show that. This picture here especially, I'd like to point out, this is a 1939 picture combination of the original building over at where now St. Anthony High School is, that at that time actually had buildings for the high school and the elementary school. And here is that third church that was built on the foundations of the second one after the 1933 earthquake without the spires and without the mosaics, of course. But you can see the body of the church, and simply those spires and the mosaics and everything were added later in the late 40s, early 50s.
What year did you say this picture is from?
This picture is 1939. And
wow,
there
you
is,
had quite a large student body here at that time.
we did, and that's the elementary school and including high school. And one of my great joys is the alums, including clergy and religious, who have come in here and said, I'm in that picture, and are able to point themselves out because of their particular time.
You know, Father Richard, that doesn't surprise me, because so often when I say I'm going to film St. Anthony's, or I say something about St. Anthony, somebody said, oh, I graduated from there. And I just can't believe how many people I know who are alumni from St. Anthony's.
Yes, that's true, and that's been also something that's been wonderful as becoming, I'm the 10th pastor in the history of St. Anthony, and coming in, I came here very much happy about the fact that I was going to become a pastor in a parish that has such a wonderful golden history. All through my life, I've been taught by priests in the seminary who came from St. Anthony, and religious women who have come from this parish have figured in my life all along. And this is my 30th year as a priest, and I can't think of a better place to be in terms of the history of the church in Los Angeles Archdiocese and here in Long Beach. My ties were that I grew up nearby in Buena Park, but my father worked for McDonnell Douglas in his last years, and lots of relatives here in Long Beach. So when I came in, I've just been delighted to go all around, and wherever I go consistently, whether it's banks or post offices or police, people will see and say, oh, you're from St. Anthony, I went to school there.
So you're a native Californian?
No, born in Minnesota, actually.
Oh.
But my parents were snowbirds and moved out here in 1955 when I was 8 years old. So, and then this picture here actually is very interesting also, because it is from the early 50s. And as you can see, again, we still have the third church without the spires added on yet. So this is really late 40s, I guess. But the existing parking lot now has all this housing with actually the rectory there, which is 1920s construction. But then the parking lot was completely, these buildings were taken down to provide the parking lot. The church owned these buildings that are, some of which are still standing across the street. And then you were talking about the Balboa Studios.
Right, now that would be back there in the area right behind the church where the elementary school building is now? Because that's 6th Street going right down there.
Yes, this is 6th Street here, and this is Alamitos here. And then over here in the area, which is, this area over here is now the Museum of Latin American Art. And this is the Hippodrome skating rink right there.
And that was all part of the Balboa Studios between 1913 and 1918.
That's my understanding, and because I know when I was taught, when I first came here, I was on a board for the Museum of Latin American Art, and they were explaining that they were converting this building here into a special facility that would allow their programming. But they were trying to preserve as much as possible the...
Now, if we would go north on Olive from the church, we would go down to where the school is now?
This is Olive here, so
yes.
Going north, you have the whole high school here. And the elementary school is, because they had actually built the Jack Arian gym, that is already standing here. This building came down and provided more parking later. So that's vacant and become parking. But over here, they built the elementary school, which is the present brick building that sits on the corner of 5th and Alamitos.
Give us some idea of what you're going to do to celebrate your 100th birthday.
Well, we've been at it for the best part of, since the Feast of St. Anthony, June 13th, 2002, we had Cardinal Mahoney come out, and he opened the centennial year with a special mass here. And following upon that, we had various activities. Some traveling around may see the banners that we still have up on the streets surrounding the whole area of St. Anthony's that celebrate our centennial, that say St. Anthony 100 years Long Beach, and they're on most of the poles around the surrounding streets. From there, we went on to, we put together a pilgrimage in the footsteps of St. Anthony that started off in Lisbon, in Portugal, and then followed through various parts of his life into Italy and places that he was significant in Italy, and especially Padua, where he wound up with and developed his tremendous preaching personal history, so well known. But then after that, we have had several events that we want to really earmark St. Anthony's 100 years. And one of those was a plan to put together a connection with our ecumenical community here in Long Beach, very important to us. I'm happy to be a member of the board of the South Coast Ecumenical Association. And we were looking for a way to say, how is it that we understand ourselves as churches trying to come together, faiths and interfaith activities that create a more unified people and community. And so wonderfully, Reverend Jenny Wagner, the chair of, or the executive director, and our current president, Dottie Weiner, who agreed that the ecumenical baptism should take place at St. Anthony for its centennial year. This will be the second event of this kind. And basically we invite other denominations who celebrate baptism in the Christian faith to come and baptize according to their own customs and rites in our church, and that we will baptize on that day also, just to show our unity in faith and baptism.
Now, I think you had mentioned to me before that some of them was going to be total immersion.
Yes, that's right.
Where in the church would you have a place for total immersion?
Well, we actually, up near the altar, Father Caruso, who was my immediate predecessor, one of the advancements he made for the church was to put together a more elaborate baptistry and baptismal font to include, as the Roman Catholic Church does now, include the option of total immersion, both for infants and adults. And so he built a pool to accommodate that. But I had one of our local ministers was a little doubtful that the Romans knew how to do this, so he came over and measured. But he's very satisfied and said he thinks we did a good job.
We'll have to run back over to the church and see this.
I would love to show you.
What else would you like to tell us?
Well, just as we've tried to build a better relationship with the historical societies and associations in Long Beach. They've always been very supportive, but now we would like to become even more deliberate in building up that relationship and being able to offer our resources from our 100-year history. And so in this area and the several rooms surrounding it, we've provided for putting together files that have been hidden away in the basements, and all kinds of archival material and artifacts that tell the story of St. Anthony and really the story of Long Beach as well, and be able to display some of those things and share them, much like these pictures that we've been looking at. We have others that are yet to go up. These books over here, I'd like to point out, are the original baptismal books for St. Anthony Parish, and marriage books that go all the way back to 1902. Father Ramon Ferrer was the very first pastor of St. Anthony, and here are baptismal records of his, all written in his own hand.
Do you have any idea what the size of the congregation would have been in 1902?
Well, actually, I believe that it started off as probably around 50 people, because these people had been going over to Wilmington to go to Mass in carriage, horse and buggy.
Because there was no Catholic church in Long Beach?
Because there was no Catholic church here. And as a matter of fact, very interesting, the actual motivation, Bishop George Montgomery had desired a church for Long Beach as far back as 1900, but nothing really happened until the lay people here in Long Beach made it their own purpose to request the establishment of a parish here. There was a lady, Mrs. J.M. Morris, who was walking on the beach one day back in 1902. And she overheard a conversation that there were all these denominations coming into Long Beach, but not the Roman Catholics. And there was some attitude about that. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Morris thought that odd and wanted to consult with Catholic friends about that. And so she really began the talk about establishing a church here. But the interesting thing is she was not Catholic.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be over in the St. Anthony's Catholic Church.
Pacific Family Health Clinic is a low-cost, high-quality alternative to the rushed impersonal medical office. This medical school-affiliated teaching clinic returns to the personal, timely, quality care that's often missing in medicine today. You'll be seen in a relaxed, comfortable environment with the thoroughness of care and individual attention necessary for good health. So if you need a good family doctor for the long term, or just a one-time visit for a second opinion or a specific problem, the Pacific Family Health Clinic is the place to go.
Welcome to the El Dorado Park Golf Course, where golf pros like me hang out. I can never count on my putting, but I can always rely on El Dorado's Eagle Specials. $2.95 breakfast, $4.95 lunches, and $6.95 dinners. Even if you're not a pro, you can enjoy great service at even better prices. The El Dorado Park Golf Course Restaurant and Pub.
Okay, Father Richard, now explain this to me. It almost looks like a indoor jacuzzi.
Well, I assure you that was not our goal. But oftentimes in churches that have remodeled and offered these new baptismal fonts and areas, they're often criticized of how they turn out. But we were very fortunate in that Father Lawrence Caruso, my predecessor, when he decided to reconfigure the baptismal font, he was able to use the existing materials here to keep everything historically faithful to the art and architecture of the church. This, of course, is the baptismal font that was a part of this third church. And then we would baptize infants in the small pool here, but then branching out and adding the lower pool simply gave us the option of having the baptism of infants and adults. It's the option of the parents and of the individuals, if they're adults, whether they want to be baptized with pouring or with complete immersion. And I have to get in there too.
That was going to be my next question. If it's a total immersion, you do have to get into the font or into the baptismal?
Well, I suppose I have options too, but I choose to get in. I figure if I'm asking them to do it, I should get in there with them, give them a little support. And so I was able to baptize an infant here in this pool for this past Easter, and also an adult. And now for the ecumenical baptism coming up, we have, I think, now 4 denominations that will be coming on June 1st to perform this baptism according to their own rites and rituals. But according to our own tradition in the Catholic faith, we recognize the validity of these baptisms. And so whenever we receive someone into the church from another denomination, we never rebaptize them because we recognize the validity of that baptism. And we want to show that unity, and therefore are having a joint baptism.
How many are you expecting?
Well, we will have, for the 4 denominations or so participating, we expect that there will be as many as 8 to 10 candidates for baptism, and but then that will be multiplied by their families and friends and everything. So we'll have a pretty full church for that, and then a nice reception out in the patio afterwards.
As I look at the altar, Father, the mosaic there are just as beautiful as they are outside. I want to thank you for joining us today and giving us a tour of St. Anthony's, because it's been a wonderful experience. The church is beautiful. And happy birthday.
Thank you, Harvey. Thank you very much.
And be sure and join us again next month as we take another walk through history and uncover more Long Beach treasures.